Thank you. Starting with my relevant disclosures, and then our case study. 34-year-old man who was recently diagnosed with a HIV infection and was also found to be positive for the hepatitis B surface antigen. Further tests show that he has chronic HBV infection. There is a very high global burden of a chronic HBV infection. Data from WHO showed that in 2018, there were 257 million carriers of the infection and nearly 900,000 deaths. From a global perspective, approximately 10% of people with HIV also have chronic HBV infection with some geographical variability. It is well established that having HIV increases the risk of severe liver disease among people with hepatitis B. And we can see in this cohort study that was published in 2006 that liver-related death was the most common cause of non-AIDS death among people with HIV, and that hepatitis B co-infection was a significant predictor of liver-related death. So how do we assess chronic HBV infection at first diagnosis? We take a detailed history and a physical examination. We measure markers of HBV activity, liver and kidney function, coagulation, platelet count, alpha-fetoprotein. We don't forget about coexisting causes of liver disease, Hep C, Delta, steatosis, use of hepatotoxic agents, including alcohol. Check for hepatitis A immunity, take an abdominal ultrasound scan, primarily to check for liver cancer. Also measure fibrosis. We do this typically with a transient elastography, and some specific cutoffs have been proposed for liver stiffness in people with HIV and hepatitis B to determine the presence and degree of fibrosis. If possible, we also use the FibroScan to measure the controlled attenuation parameter in order to take a measure of liver steatosis. If there is advanced liver disease, we take a DEXA scan to check the bone mineral density. And then if there is a cirrhosis, we will also take an upper GI endoscopy to check for varices. How do we stage a chronic HBV infection? We use three markers, the E antigen, the HBV DNA, and the ALT. Patients who are infected vertically or at a very young age experience an initial phase of the infection that can last 2 or even 3 decades. This is the so-called immunotolerant phase. When the E antigen is positive, there are very high levels of HBV DNA and the ALT is normal. In the following phase, we see a disease activity. The E antigen is positive, the DNA is greater than 20,000 international units, and the ALT is persistently raised. This is E antigen positive chronic hepatitis B. In patients that continue during their chronic HBV infection, spontaneously they may lose the E antigen, or they may have started antiviral therapy and lose the E antigen during treatment. We then see a loss of E antigen. The ALT in patients who are untreated may decline to low or undetectable levels spontaneously, and the ALT becomes normal. This is the so-called inactive or low-level carrier stage of the infection. However, in some patients, as we know, it's possible for the virus to continue to replicate without expressing E antigen, and therefore we can have E antigen negativity with the HBV DNA level which is greater than 2,000 and either persistently or intermittently raised ALT. This is active disease, also defined as E antigen negative chronic hepatitis B. The two groups with E antigen positivity or E antigen negativity that have disease activity are candidates for treatment in the context of hepatitis B mono infection. A couple of comments about the ALT. We use an upper limit which is a bit lower than the typical laboratory reference, 33 for men and 25 for women. And also, we need to consider that in the context of HIV, particularly in patients who are immunocompromised, the ALT may not be very high despite significant disease activity. When we assess for other causes of liver disease, we must not forget to test for hepatitis delta virus. Overall, 4.5% of people who are surface antigen positive also have hepatitis delta, and the risk of having hepatitis delta is actually much increased in people who also have HIV. Coming back to our case study, the E antigen is positive, the DNA is high, and the ALT is borderline. Other tests are not remarkable. However, we note that there is a degree of liver fibrosis and also a degree of liver steatosis. What next for our patients? Unlike the situation with the mono infection, in people who are co-infected with HIV, treatment for hepatitis B is recommended regardless of the degree of disease activity. And treatment is typically with agents that have dual activity against HIV and hepatitis B, i.e. tenofovir. We usually tend to use tenofovir alongside tricitabine or lamivudine. However, tenofovir per se is sufficient to treat hepatitis B. We recommend against using TTC or FTC alone against HBV because of the high risk of drug resistance. There are some key factors that influence treatment decisions. We take into consideration kidney function because it affects the use of tenofovir. There are also circumstances when it may affect the use of TAF. So, for example, we don't have sufficient safety data for TAF in patients that have a very low eGFR below 15 and are not on hemodialysis. We also consider bone health because it affects tenofovir use, of course, concomitant medications that may create a risk of drug-drug interactions. And it's also important for us to dig into the patient history and identify any previous history of lamivudine exposure without tenofovir, because this may lead to drug resistance, as we said, and also potentially affect the use of entecavir. Tenofovir is very effective in the treatment of chronic HBV infection. Most data are available for TDF. TDF is highly efficacious. It's also very effective against a virus that has accumulated 3TC resistance. We see here HBV DNA responses in co-infected patients that had accumulated significant 3TC resistance and then were treated with tenofovir as TDF. We can see that over 8 to 12 months, there was a sharp decline in HBV DNA levels in this population. HBV resistance to tenofovir is rare, although it has been occasionally reported. And overall, the long-term safety of TDF is good when compared to entecavir. For example, in the context of monoinfection, we have recently seen data spanning 7 years and showing that overall the safety profile is similar for TDF and entecavir, although renal tubular dysfunction is more likely to occur on TDF. What about TDF versus TAF? There have been 2 large studies that have compared TDF and TAF in monoinfection and showed that TAF was non-inferior virologically to TDF. Patients on TAF, interestingly, were more likely to show normalized ALT levels, and perhaps less surprisingly, also had smaller decreases in bone mineral density and also smaller changes in eGFR. There are also data for co-infected patients. For instance, in a study of 70 patients that switched suppressive ART to a TAF and FTC containing regimen, there were very high levels of HBV DNA suppression over 48 weeks. We may occasionally use entecavir. In this case, we must take into account the possibility of 3TC exposure and therefore 3TC resistance, because this may cause cross-resistance to entecavir. If there is only one lamivudine mutation, for instance, a 204V mutation typically, then we may use entecavir at the higher dose of 1 milligram per day. when there is more extensive resistance, then really entecavir is not our drug, and we should reassess the option of using tenofovir instead. So our patients were started on TDF and FTC alongside dolutegravir. How do we monitor the infection once treatment is started? Initially, we monitor the HBV DNA and the transaminases a bit more frequently. We would like to see at least one log decline in HBV DNA after 12 weeks, and most patients will achieve an undetectable HBV DNA within a year. Some may take a bit longer, up to 2 years. And in a small subset, actually, we may see a very, very slow decline, and they may achieve undetectability over several years, even up to 5 years of treatment. Once the HBV DNA has come down to undetectable and the ALT has normalized, if it was raised, then we can decrease the frequency of monitoring. We monitor renal and liver function as per standard requirements. And if the patient is e antigen positive, we also monitor for evidence of e antigen seroconversion about every 6 months. And then we stop if seroconversion occurs. Although, of course, we then retest for e antigen if there is a flag, for example, a sudden increase in HBV DNA or ALT. We don't forget about monitoring for fibrosis and steatosis. And of course, we continue to screen for cancer, because the risk of hepatocellular carcinoma is not abolished, although it is reduced by antiviral therapy and HBV DNA suppression. There are some difficult scenarios to consider, for example, what to do if the patient is still showing HBV DNA detectability and has been more than 2 years since the start of antiviral therapy, perhaps with a drug such as tenofovir. We get a bit more concerned if the LT remains elevated. In these cases, we may consider a trial of intensification with entecavir, for example. We may decide to continue to monitor, because we know that a subset of patients take a bit longer to get undetectable, as we said, up to 5 years. But I would like to share one tip. If the HBV DNA is being monitored with a TMA-based assay, then we may want to ask for another assay just to confirm the viremia. And this is because we know now that in some patients who receive a very effective antiviral therapy and have a fully suppressed HBV DNA, there may still be circulating HBV RNA. And a TMA-based assay has an increased likelihood of detecting HBV RNA and reporting it as an HBV DNA signal. A resistance test is more informative for patients on entecavir. It's usually not very informative for patients on tenofovir. And of course, if there is any entecavir resistance, we must reassess the option of using tenofovir instead. So what about treatment duration? At present, treatment for people with HIV and hepatitis B is lifelong. We must remember the risk of rebound in case treatment is discontinued against hepatitis B. There is a risk of rebound. There is also a risk of significant severe hepatitis flares, and even liver failure has been described in the past in this co-infected population. The risk of rebound is due to the fact that the HBV replication cycle includes the formation of a mini chromosome, the covalently closed circular DNA, within the nucleus of infected hepatocytes. Antiviral therapy, tenofovir and entecavir, work on the reverse transcription of pregenomic RNA into DNA prior to export of the virus progeny, but they do not really control cccDNA. And therefore, it's possible to have a rebound once treatment is discontinued. There is, however, a lot of research going on at present, trying to develop drugs that will enable a cure of chronic hepatitis B. These studies are currently in phase 1 and phase 2. At present, they exclude people with HIV, but we certainly look forward to being able to offering new options for the control of hepatitis B to our co-infected population. Thank you very much.